There's this person you know, maybe a coworker, maybe someone from your neighborhood, maybe a friend of a friend you see occasionally at things. And on the surface, they look completely normal. They dress normally, they drive a normal car, not a beater, not a luxury vehicle, just a car. They go to the same grocery store as you. They talk about money the same way most people do, which is to say, they don't really talk about it at all. And then one day, completely offhand, you find out something. Maybe they paid cash for their house. Maybe they mentioned they've been investing since they were 23. Maybe you see something that just doesn't compute given everything you thought you knew about their financial situation. And you think, how? How have they been sitting on that this whole time? How did I not notice? The answer is that you were looking for the wrong signals. Most of us have been trained by advertising, by social media, by movies, by just the general culture of stuff to associate wealth with visible things. The watch, the car, the bag, the vacation photo, the restaurant, the clothes. But real wealth, not the performance of wealth, actual accumulated money, it doesn't look like any of that. It often looks like nothing at all. It's quiet, deliberately quiet. And when you learn to read the actual signals, you start seeing them everywhere, in people you'd never have guessed, maybe eventually in the mirror. My name is Peter, and if you've ever wondered why some people seem financially calm in a way that has nothing to do with what they're wearing or driving, and you want to understand what actually separates someone who's building real wealth from someone who's just performing it, subscribe before we keep going, because the 13 things I'm about to walk through aren't what you'd expect. And once you see them, you'll start noticing them everywhere. Before we get to the signs, I want to set up why this matters. Because the reason most people can't identify secret wealth is that they're comparing it against the wrong model of what money looks like. Here's what most people in the $55,000 to $75,000 income range do with their money. And I want to be specific because specific is honest. Let's say you make $65,000 a year. After taxes, federal, state, FICA, you're taking home about $47,000. That's roughly $3,900 a month. Rent, $1,550. Car payment, $390. Car insurance, $160. Student loans, $310. Phone and utilities, $180. Groceries, $330. That's $2,920 in monthly fixed costs. You've got $980 left, and with $980, you're covering gas, social spending, clothing, anything unexpected, coffee, the birthday dinner you didn't budget for, the parking ticket, the whatever it is this month. Most months you end up somewhere around zero, sometimes a little above it, sometimes a little below. And here's the thing, you look totally fine from the outside. You go out, you take a trip once a year, you have a nice enough apartment and a decent car. You wear normal clothes and occasionally something nicer. To an outside observer, to a coworker, to a neighbor, to someone who doesn't know your bank balance, you look financially comfortable. But you're not building anything. You're sustaining. There's a difference. Sustaining means the number in your account stays roughly constant. It goes up with each paycheck and down with each week of living, and the net change over a year is small. Building means the number compounds. It grows, and each year's growth funds next year's growth, and the thing quietly gets bigger without you having to do anything new. Most people in the $55,000 to $75,000 range are sustaining. Some of them are building. And from the outside, you often cannot tell the difference because the people who are building have learned that the most important thing about wealth isn't how it looks, it's how it moves, quietly, automatically, in the background, while everything on the surface looks completely ordinary. That's what the 13 signs are actually pointing at. Not luxury, not restriction, specific, observable behaviors that separate someone who's building from someone who's sustaining, and that most people walk right past without recognizing. Let's go through them. And I want to go slowly enough that each one actually lands, because a few of these are counterintuitive. Sign 1. They don't talk about money, but they're not uncomfortable around it either. There's a specific type of person who talks about money constantly, what things cost, what they spent, what someone else must be making, what a deal they got. And there's a different type of person who avoids finances conversations entirely, who gets slightly tense when finances come up, who deflects. Secretly wealthy people do neither. They're just neutral. They can talk about a purchase without drama. They can hear what something costs without visible reaction. They don't perform frugality and they don't perform abundance. Money is just a tool to them, and they treat it with about as much emotional charge as they'd treat a hammer. That neutrality is a tell. Financial anxiety produces one of two behaviors, either constant conversation about money or active avoidance of it. Calm produces neither. Sign 2. Their car is always slightly older than you'd expect. Not old and falling apart, just older than their income would suggest. A 2018 or 2019 model when they could probably afford a 2023. Practical, paid off, unremarkable. The average new car payment right now is over $700 a month. That's $8,400 a year going to a vehicle that depreciates. People who are quietly building wealth tend to have made peace with a car that works, rather than a car that signals. They did the math at some point and decided that $700 a month invested for 10 years is $120,000. And that math won. Sign 3. They make decisions slowly and without obvious excitement. You mention a new phone came out, they shrug, maybe mention theirs is fine. There's a sale on something, they don't immediately pull out their card. They think about it, sometimes for days. This isn't cheapness, it's the behavior of someone who has separated their impulse to buy something from the decision to buy it. Most people experience the impulse and the decision as the same event. They want something, so they get it. Secretly wealthy people have, either consciously or through practice, created a gap there. They feel the want, they just don't act on it automatically. At a grocery store on a Tuesday evening, they're not doing mental math about whether they can afford something. They're asking a different question. Do I actually want this, or does it just look appealing right now? Those are not the same question. Sign 4. They have specific knowledge about their own finances. Not general knowledge, not I think I have a decent amount in savings, or I've been putting some money away. Specific knowledge. They know their investment account balance. They know their net worth within a few $1,000s. They know what interest rate they got on their mortgage and what their monthly payment is and when it pays off. This sounds obvious. It isn't. Most people have a vague, approximate sense of their financial situation. The people who are building have a precise one, because you can't grow something you're not measuring. The specificity is a signal that someone is paying attention in a way most people aren't. Sign 6. They talk about time differently, not in a philosophical way, practically. They make decisions based on 10-year and 20-year timelines in contexts where most people are thinking about next month. They'll mention offhand that they've been in a particular investment for 7 years, or that they bought their house thinking they'd stay for 15. They don't frame these as sacrifices or disciplines, they just naturally zoom out when other people are zoomed in. This is a behavior pattern, not a personality type. It comes from having things that are growing. When something is growing, you think about it differently. You protect it differently. The time horizon extends because the reward for a longer horizon becomes concrete and visible. Sign 6. They're not impressed by other people's expensive things. Not in an eye-rolling judgment way, just genuinely not engaged by it. You mention that your neighbor got a new car or that someone you both know just bought a big house, and they kind of nod. They're not performing indifference. They're just not interested. This is one of the more reliable signals. Status anxiety, the need to measure yourself against what other people have, is almost universal among people who don't feel financially secure. When you do feel secure, the comparison stops mattering. Not because you've become a saint, but because the game you're playing isn't about appearances anymore. You've already opted out of that particular competition. Sign 7. They almost never complain about prices going up. Everyone around them is discussing inflation, the cost of groceries, how expensive things have gotten. And they might acknowledge it, but there's no edge to it, no tightness. They're not tracking it the same way. When you have a financial buffer, real savings, real investments, inflation is an intellectual topic. When your margin is thin,
Inflation is a physical experience. It changes how you walk through a grocery store. It changes how you feel on Sunday night. The absence of that edge, that low-grade tension around costs and prices, is one of the quietest tells there is. Sign 8. They spend significantly on a small number of things and almost nothing on everything else. This is the pattern that most closely mirrors what research on wealthy households actually shows. They have one or two areas where they spend deliberately and generously. Maybe travel, maybe food, maybe their home. And everywhere else, they're surprisingly modest. They don't buy expensive things across the board. They've picked what actually matters to them and they spend there, and they genuinely don't care about the rest. The person at the office who brings lunch every day and drives a 6-year-old Civic and then mentions somewhat casually that they spent $4,000 on a week in Portugal last summer, that pattern, deliberate, concentrated, specific spending against a backdrop of general indifference to cost, is one of the clearest signs of someone who's been managing money thoughtfully for a long time. Sign 9. They own things outright. The car is paid off. The furniture isn't on a payment plan. They bought the laptop in cash. This seems small. It isn't. Most middle-income people are financing things constantly. Subscriptions, installment plans, credit card balances carried month to month. The financial system is extraordinarily good at converting large lump sums into small monthly payments that feel manageable and are psychologically invisible. People who've been building wealth quietly have gradually unwound from that system. Not all at once, not perfectly, but they've noticed what it costs, and they've been buying their way out of it piece by piece. The things they own, they own. Sign 10. They have a specific relationship with their employer. They're good at their job. They show up, but they're not desperate. You can feel it. It's not arrogance. It's not attitude. It's that specific quality of someone who can afford to say no if they need to. They negotiate differently. They handle difficult conversations with management differently. They don't have that faint hum of anxiety around their employment status that most salaried people carry somewhere under the surface. Financial security changes your posture at work in ways that are hard to describe, but easy to sense. When you have 6 months of expenses saved and investments accumulating in the background, you're not quite as dependent on any specific paycheck. And that independence, even partial independence, is physically legible to people around you in ways you might not consciously register. Sign 11. They're genuinely unbothered by financial news. Markets dropped 3% today. There's talk of a recession. Rates went up again, and they just don't react. Not because they're uninformed, they might know more about this stuff than you do, but because they've structured their finances to absorb variance rather than be threatened by it. When you're living close to the edge, financial news is personal. When you have a buffer, it's general. The person who shrugs at a bad market day either has nothing invested or has enough invested and a long enough time horizon that the day's movement is noise. Given the other signs, it's usually the latter. Sign 12. They give without calculation. A friend needs help with something small. A family member needs a few $100s. They help without visible math happening in their head. They're not tracking it, not making a face, not running through mental scenarios about whether they can afford it. This isn't generosity as a personality trait. It's a behavior that becomes possible when you have enough. When your margin is thin, every outflow is a calculation. When it isn't, you can respond to people without financial overhead. The absence of that overhead is visible. Sign 13. They seem to have already figured out something that everyone else is still trying to solve. This one is the hardest to articulate, but the most real. There's a quality of settledness to people who've been building wealth quietly for a while. Not smugness, not satisfaction exactly, just the specific calm of someone who has already answered a question that most people are still asking. The question is, am I going to be okay? Most people are still asking it. Their finances don't give them the answer yet. And so it hums underneath everything. The Sunday night math, the tight feeling when an unexpected expense comes up, the background awareness of how thin the margin is. The secretly wealthy person has answered it, not permanently, not without uncertainty, but well enough that the question has quieted, and that quiet shows up in how they move through the world, in how they sit in a meeting, in how they talk about the future, in the specific absence of that low-grade vigilance that most of us have stopped noticing because we've been carrying it for so long. So here's what these 13 signs are actually pointing at, taken together. None of them are about income. Some of the people who display all 13 of these signs make $55,000 a year,
Some people who display none of them make $200,000. Income is one input. What you do with it over time is the whole game. And none of them are about deprivation. The person with the paid-off older car and the deliberate travel spending is not living a diminished life. They've made a set of decisions about what actually matters to them, and they've stopped spending energy, mental, financial, emotional, on the things that don't. That's the actual trait being pointed at by all 13 signs. Decision clarity. Having thought at some point about what money is for in your specific life, and then having structured your behavior around that answer, rather than around whatever the culture around you is suggesting you want this week. Most people haven't done that, not because they're lazy or indisciplined, because it's genuinely uncomfortable to sit with that question, and the answer isn't always flattering. Looking at your actual spending and asking, does this reflect what I actually value? A lot of people find a gap there between what they say matters and where the money actually goes. The people who've closed that gap, or at least narrowed it, are the ones displaying these signs. They're not extraordinary, they haven't discovered something secret. They've mostly just made peace with something that most people are still negotiating, that the visual signals of wealth and the actual experience of financial security are almost entirely unconnected, and that building the second thing usually requires giving up the performance of the first. I want to say something plainly before we finish. Most of these signs are things you can start doing now at your current income in your current situation. Not all of them. Some require having already built something. But the neutral relationship with money, the slightly older car, these slow, deliberate decisions, the specific financial knowledge, the longer time horizon, those are behaviors, not outcomes. They're how you get to the outcomes. None of them are Instagram-worthy. Nobody's posting their brokerage account statement or their paid-off car. The whole thing is designed to be invisible. That's the point. The performance of wealth is loud by design because its function is internal security. The people showing all 13 signs aren't trying to signal anything to you. They don't need to. That's the clearest sign of all.
So here's the thing about secret wealth. It's not actually secret. It's just quiet in ways that most people aren't trained to notice, because everything we've been taught to associate with money is loud, visible, designed to be seen. And the actually wealthy person isn't playing that game. They stepped off that particular treadmill at some point, some of them early, some of them after a few expensive lessons, and decided to optimize for something that doesn't photograph well: peace, margin, options. The ability to walk into any situation, financial or otherwise, without that background hum of, can I afford this? Can I handle this? What happens if something goes wrong? The 13 signs aren't a checklist to judge other people against. They're a mirror. They're a description of a set of behaviors and orientations that, accumulated over time, produce a specific kind of financial life. One that looks completely ordinary from the outside and feels completely different from the inside. You can start with one, the older car or the deliberate spending, or just knowing your own numbers precisely. Pick one thing where your current behavior doesn't match the person you're describing, not because it'll make you look secretly wealthy to the people around you. They probably won't notice at all, because the person who eventually doesn't need to think about money so much, that person starts somewhere. And the somewhere is usually something small, something quiet, something that barely registers as a decision at the time. The quietly wealthy person you know has been making those small decisions for years. Nobody threw them a party. Nobody posted about it. It just accumulated. That's how it works. If you want to see the exact opposite of this, and why the people desperately trying to look wealthy are actually the ones drowning in debt, click the video on your screen right now. Stop faking it and start actually building it. I'll see you there.